that incredible calling on their life. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a second, but first I will say I know there are many nurses in our midst. They all have different stories. These two girls have different stories. I'm just excited for you to hear a little bit about their experience over the past couple of months. And so without any further wait, I'll start with you, Katie. Go ahead, introduce yourself, a little bit about your family, where you're working, and what you do.
Well, my name is Katie Downing, and I have a wonderful husband and two daughters, a 4-year-old and a 7-month-old. And I am an RN in the operating room at Providence, and I specialize in general and trauma surgery.
I'm Candace Ross, and I am a labor and delivery nurse and board-certified lactation consultant at Evergreen Health in Kirkland. I am a busy mother to 5, and I have a wonderful husband that keeps me sane for the most part. And we are homeschooling 5 kids on top of me working full time, and so we know that struggle really well for those families that are learning how to juggle all the things right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've all experienced massive amounts of change. So we share that in common. Everyone who's watching, the 3 of us sitting here, we've all experienced a ton of change. But I would love to hear a little bit about what the past couple of months have been like in your sphere, through your lens. A little bit about maybe your occupation first, and then we'll kind of talk about family. So what's it been like for you, Katie, at Providence, and what's your life been like for a couple of months now?
Well, I came back to work in the middle of this pandemic, so I came back to work on April 10th, and basically my workplace as I knew it was not at all the same. Everything had changed. We had no cases, we had canceled all elective surgeries, and we're only taking care of patients who couldn't wait and absolutely needed surgery. So we went from functioning at 100% capacity in 18 operating rooms down to maybe running 2 to 5 operating rooms in a day, just a handful of cases. So there's definitely a huge change with our staffing and with the amount of people that we needed. And right before I came back to work, they had redeployed probably about 50% of our staff to other departments. So that was a big change because some of our coworkers were still there in the hospital, but some of them had gone to care for patients on the floor or have changed to guarding the entrances and doing temperature screening. So there's definitely a lot of changes there, not to mention the changes with our personal protective equipment or our PPE, because normally in the operating room, we fly through personal protective equipment. We use a mask. When we're done with it, we toss it, and that's the end. Mm-hmm. Now I have one mask that I use for my whole 12-hour shift, and I have one N95 that I have to use for 5 patients before I can get another one. So definitely a huge change there.
How about you, Candace? Tell us what the last 2 months have been like at Evergreen.
Well, it's been a process of constant evolution because there's not a lot of data about COVID. So there's just constant process change. And similar to Katie, I am masked when interacting with patients, so in patient care areas. So I too get a surgical mask that I wear for my entire shift, 1 per shift. And then when I'm interacting or testing mamas who we're screening for COVID, then I do have an N95 that I wear for that process. Definitely a lot of changes in maternity care. Maternity is a kind of a splashy area of medicine. There's a lot of things that happen during delivery that put us at pretty high risk. And so we've really limited personnel to be able to have enough protective equipment to safely not expose ourselves. And so it's 2 people for support per laboring mom, and that's been really hard. Siblings aren't allowed in the department, grandparents aren't allowed, visitors aren't allowed. A lot of nice things to have, like a professional photographer, not allowed. So it's really impacted a lot of the, social aspects of the birthing process, which has been really hard for a lot of our moms. And then on admission, all of our patients are universally screened for COVID. And unfortunately, I'm one of the swabbers. So I test anywhere from 6 to 10 moms a day for COVID. And it's a really invasive procedure and really hard to have a mom who's laboring and in pain and having to collect that sample. So it's hard, but there's also been some beautiful aspects of the changes. I feel like our patients look a lot more to us for assistance and guidance and reassurance because they're scared. And so there's been some beautiful aspects of those changes that have been cool.
You're
about
looking on the bright side.
Looking on the bright side. I'm an optimist. So, yeah.
Both of you have obviously seen, I mean, if somebody comes in a trauma situation, I imagine that they're limited on who they can bring into the ER with them, if anybody. And obviously people are being screened right there as well, are they not?
Yes. None of our patients can have any visitors whatsoever unless they're a minor. So unless you're a parent or guardian of the minor undergoing surgery, you are waiting in the waiting room or waiting in pre-op or in the emergency room with nobody with you. None of your loved ones can join you. That can be super difficult and stressful for these patients, and I'm always being very careful to make sure that I know what loved ones are waiting to hear about them and who to call when their surgery is all done. Because even though they're not physically there in the hospital waiting to hear how their loved one is doing, we know that they're waiting at home just as anxious, if not more so.
Right.
Yeah.
So Candace, normally in a labor and delivery unit, you might be aiding a few women who are in labor simultaneously. Are you able to still do that? Can you go from room to room?
Yeah, there's a lot of protective things in place for that exact scenario because we are in a kind of a high contact area of medicine, and so we have a whole what used to be our baby classroom. So we would have the newborn care and feeding class every day, which we've had to suspend. So that whole room has turned into kind of a COVID command center, and so we have these quick packs that we can quickly grab everything we need for a delivery for an untested or COVID positive family, so that we can protect ourselves and the many providers that need to be present for a delivery. Being a charge nurse, I do go through a little bit more of things, but we have enough PPE if we're using it wisely. And so far, we, between community assistance and the hospital's wise management of their resources, we have everything we need to safely provide care at this time, and we're grateful for that.
So talk to me about and maybe I just need more information, but from what I've understood, when a woman delivers, she has a choice to make in these circumstances with the potential for COVID. Is it only if she tests positive that she has to make a decision of where her baby will be? Okay, so talk to me about what that looks like if a woman comes in labor testing positive for COVID.
Yes. So that is kind of it's such a difficult situation when that's happened. So far in our hospital, that's happened twice. Both times, thankfully, the moms at the time of delivery were well, so they were no longer symptomatic. So their viral loads were lower at that point. And so the World Health Organization did, make one statement, and then they backtracked a little bit depending on whether moms are actively expressing illness or if they are asymptomatic carriers. If you're an asymptomatic carrier, the viral load is believed to be less. And currently at Evergreen, we are allowing parents to kind of make that choice for themselves as long as they're not in the thickest illness portion. And so we have different things to try to help parents actually socially distance from their babies. So we have this really cool bassinet called a snoo, which you kind of zip the baby into this little cocoon, and if the baby starts to cry, the snoo actually undulates and rocks to kind of soothe the baby. And then when we do encourage breastfeeding, because then babies are getting the protection from the antibodies in mother's milk. And so, but we do ask that mom wear a mask during breastfeeding or in times when she is having contact with her baby.
Wow.
So it's hard for that family, and it's hard for us as healthcare workers because we don't want to unduly expose ourselves as well. And so I think that patients that are COVID positive end up feeling very isolated because we try to minimize contact points to protect ourselves. But I think it's just sad for them that I think they probably end up feeling isolated.
Such
or a
a
little bit
joyful
shunned.
experience that has lost some of its joy.
Some of its joy, because everyone has to wear, a lot of gear when they're interacting with them, and so it's hard.
Katie, talk to me. You and I were talking this past week about what the emergency rooms look like right now. And you were describing less patients, but much more severe. So talk to us about what the emergency room looks like.
Yeah, so right now, normally we have a bustling and hugely busy emergency room with long waits and sick patients, but right now our volumes are very low. We don't have as much patients seeking emergency care, but those that are come in much, much sicker, either strokes that are further advanced or really severe heart attacks that started a while ago. And there's a lot of fear from these patients about coming into the hospital, even though they definitely require emergency care. They're concerned about coming into the hospital and seeking that care because of coronavirus. Yeah.
And I even hesitate to say this, but it's real life. You have seen a significant uptick in domestic violence evidence.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of patients come in from either domestic violence or abuse or some sort of criminal activity. Myself as a trauma nurse, I see a lot of the gunshot wounds and the gang violence or the stabbings and things like that. So that hasn't decreased at all in these last few months. In fact, we've had a lot more patients to care for who've had those sorts of injuries.
So less patients, but more severe in how they arrive there. Wow. It's a weird world that we live in, and you both go home to husbands and babies. And Candace, I know your life involves homeschooling. Katie, you have a newborn. And so what has been the impact on your family in this time? You want to go first?
Sure. I'm very blessed that my husband had already planned to take 2 months of paternity leave when I went back to work. So Robert was already home, and so he could take care of both of the girls while I adjusted to getting back into work life. It's still been a challenge in that I am being regularly exposed to potential patients who have coronavirus, and so I've had to completely adjust, like how I get home and the process that it takes to decontaminate and wash my clothes and wipe everything down before I can see my family. So that's become a nightly ritual at this point. Fortunately, I don't have to homeschool any of my kids. My 4-year-old still has no sense of time, so she's not fully aware of anything that's going on. So those hard conversations about what's going on in the world are much more muted than they would be with older children. And when my husband goes back to work, he will be working from home. So that'll be a whole different adjustment as far as getting 2 girls cared for and getting some productive work done.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So my husband, Sean, teaches English as a second language. Oh.
You need English at
My husband, Sean, teaches English as a second language online. So in some ways, it really hasn't changed our lives too much in that sense. I still, go to work 3 days a week, 12-hour shifts, and he gets a lot less free time, I guess. So it's been more of an impact on his day because when I'm gone, then he's got littles to take care of. But our kids range from 8 to 14. Our youngest is disabled, so he takes a little bit more time commitment than the older kids. But everyone's just pitching in, and we have good days and bad days where they're fighting and no one wants to do their work and everyone's frustrated and on top of each other. And those days are hard. But we've also done a lot of puzzles together, and we do a board game every night. And we're big Catan fans, if anyone else likes Catan. So there's been some blessings to that togetherness, and I appreciate my teachers a lot more. I clean up blood and poop for a living, and I still do not want their job.
Yes.
So this just really has reinforced that I made the right choice for a career to not be a teacher.
Lots of love to all the teachers out there.
Yes,
And probably all the
thank you.
teachers are saying lots of love to you guys for what you do. I guess if I could leave us with one thing, leave our friends who are watching with one thing, I would love to leave them with something beautiful. So give us a beautiful moment or a surprising something that just was like, there's a beautiful thing here in the midst of all the chaos. Give me something beautiful, Katie.
Well, I think the biggest thing that I realized as I was coming back to work was how the community has really rallied around their healthcare workers. I feel like just about every day there's been some sort of contribution, whether it's coffee or lunch in the break room or tons of cards and drawings from kids in the community. So that's been really touching and really helps us get through those long days.
And do you see all the commercials with nurses that make you cry? Like, I love those people. Yes, agree. You guys deserve it, though.
Yeah.
Good. That's good.
I think for me, like I was kind of mentioning earlier, that the kind of forced isolation a little bit that the maternity patients are experiencing in our department has actually had some really hidden blessings where they're having this space to just be a nuclear family. They're not having to worry about visitors and guests. They're not having to worry about getting ready for pictures. They can really just connect with their babies. And that's yielded some beauty that people, have shared with me, that they didn't have to worry about offending their mother-in-law because she, is not allowed to be in the delivery room. And I think there's a quiet space that COVID has created for families that I think is beautiful. And I've had several patients really express that it was a hidden blessing to this whole thing. So, and I feel like in a way I'm also experiencing that at home because my kids are growing really fast and I'm getting to spend a lot of quality and not so good quality time with them. But I think in retrospect, I think at some point I'll really appreciate the blessings that have come along with this pandemic. And I hope I remember that more than the challenges.
Yeah.
So good. So good, both of you. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you. I know you're getting hugs and hand claps through the waves, through the internet. And we're really grateful for what you do. You represent an army of medical workers and first responders at Venture Church, but also in our community. So you're just two of the many that we love and appreciate. So thank you for what you do and for sharing your stories. And we hope that this has been encouragement to you. And these two girls are great. So when we can meet together again, make sure that you say hi to them in person.